violence and other kind of violence.
Get away! I could be at work, at school, in my car, I can still get shot by the police, but I can get shot anywhere.
So it is what it is.
What's good, YouTube? It's the Black Gen Z Mindset. Make sure you go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe, and let's get into the video.
Let's get to breaking news now. Atlanta police say a 10-year-old has suffered a gunshot wound. It happened on the 3700 block of Largo Lane in southwest Atlanta.
10-year-old. This is what's going down in the A, y'all. This is supposedly Wakanda, but we got 10-year-old young black kids being shot in the streets. It's ridiculous.
News Chopper 2 and a Channel 2 Action News reporter and photographer are on the way there. We know that 10-year-old was taken to the hospital. We do not know how that 10-year-old is doing at this time. Who was shot? We'll keep you updated.
East Point's police chief joins law enforcement officials nationwide in calling for an end to gun violence. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Courtney Bryant.
Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Haynes. Chief Sean Buchanan says that every one of the city's homicides this year involved disputes between people who knew each other. He urges residents to let cooler heads prevail. Fox 5's Deidre Dukes joins us live from East Point Police Headquarters. And Deidre, you spoke to the chief.
That's right, and what a shocking fact that every single one of those homicides and every single one of them, that those individuals knew each other, and because of that, the chiefs...
And that makes it even worse. The fact that all these individuals knew each other and they're beefing with people that they know, that they probably have frequent interactions with. Man, I mean, the community is not letting up. These super gremlins are on demon time.
Stress that meant that in every one of those cases, had those individuals been able to talk things out, those deaths could have been prevented, which is why he says it's so important for people to try to talk things out before resorting to gun violence.
For the first 6 months of the year to have 13 homicides, that's unprecedented for us.
East Point Police Chief Sean Buchanan was so alarmed by the city's high homicide rate, he wrote an open letter to the community expressing his concern.
So my man writes an open letter to the community expressing concern about the violence, dudes sliding, pulling up with straps and shooting 10-year-olds. My question is, how many of the super gremlins are actually going to read that? Okay? And then you have to ask how many of them can read that. All right? A lot of these dudes are too busy sliding on ops and not in class learning their ABCs.
I wrote the letter because of the amount of shootings we've had. My goal as chief was to reduce crime in the city of East Point. All of our crime is down with the exception of homicides.
The chief says Tuesday's deadly shooting at this apartment complex on Carriage House Court, where the victim was shot as a result of an ongoing dispute, is part of a disturbing trend.
I couldn't believe how many homicides we've had. Then I did a deep dive into what type of homicides, and all these people know each other.
The chief found that every one of the city's homicides could have been prevented by talking things out or someone just leaving.
Friends, families, and acquaintances. This is unprecedented. So I'm like, we need to do something and let the community know, hey, put down your guns. Let's start communicating with people. Let's start talking about things.
Chief Buchanan is urging people to think before they act, to use de-escalation techniques like lowering your voice when arguing or walking away to diffuse a tense situation, to put the guns down and talk things out.
Guns are not a solution to problems. They only cause bigger problems.
Now, the department is working to teach the community members how to de-escalate when it comes to situations where they might walk into something, argument escalates, and they say they really want to do what they can to help people learn how to do this before they resort to drawing guns. And they say you'll find some more information about this, some training videos on their social media platforms. Live in East Point, Deidre Dukes, Fox 5 News.
Deidre, thanks.
Local police rely on Crime Stoppers as a partner to fight crime. The program allows people to anonymously report what they know about a crime that's been committed.
Atlanta police point to the Sequoia Turner case as an example of when Crime Stoppers help them track down suspects. 11 Alive's Palosuro takes a deep dive into the nonprofit organization.
Every day
to reach out to Crime Stoppers, and you can remain anonymous.
About 50 people call Crime Stoppers Greater Atlanta, giving detectives anonymous tips to help move a case along. 168 agencies across the state use Crime Stoppers to get tips from people in the community. The Atlanta Police Department is one of them.
Monthly, we're approving 7 to 10 rewards, sometimes more.
So you heard what they said. They mentioned the Sequoia Turner case, and that was actually the case where the young girl was shot and killed in her car after they burned down the Wendy's for Rayshard Brooks. And now we see the officers who were arrested and charged for the quote-unquote murder of Rayshard Brooks suing the city because they were unjustly charged and ran through the mud, specifically by former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. All right, so we're seeing some type of retribution, but I am going to get into that incident later down the line.
But less than 50% of those rewards are picked up. Sergeant Ronald Paxton remembers when hundreds of calls a day flooded into the hotline in July 2020.
We were reading some that were 2 or 3 days old just because we had a backlog of hundreds and hundreds of tips.
That's when 8-year-old Sequoia Turner was shot and killed as she was riding in the car with her mother.
I just wanted her killer to be captured. I don't want it to be a cold case.
We reached out to a lot of community organizations asking for help.
But as the calls came into Crime Stoppers, so did a glimmer of hope for Sequoia's father.
It's a good feeling just to know that the community and the people that like behind you and they want to see justice.
Sergeant Paxton says multiple tipsters helped investigators identify the suspects.
That was some sense of relief.
The year Sequoia was killed was also a record year for Crime Stoppers Greater Atlanta.
And that was literally right after the BLM riots. So we have people out here mentioning January 6th, and it's like, yo, those riots and the ramifications afterwards had a huge impact, direct correlation to the issues that we're dealing with now.
There's a lot of anti-police rhetoric going on at the time, so you would think that tips would go down. We've seen the exact opposite.
It received 5,400 calls in 2020 compared to 4,300 in 2021.
It's extremely rewarding when you read something that sounds like it might solve something significant.
Paola Suro, 11 Alive News.
I'm here on the corner of MLK and Frederick Douglass, where a shooting just took place. And as you can see, it's a pretty rough area. So I'm basically risking my life reporting on this madness. So make sure you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Like the video, hell, share the video. And make sure you go ahead and leave a comment down in the comments section to continue the discussion on how we can find solutions to all this son violence in the streets. I'm Jenquavius Jackson, here live, reporting from Atlanta, Georgia, BGZM News 17.
With breaking news tonight, the Atlanta police officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks Friday night has been charged with murder and aggravated assault, along with 9 other charges. It was a dramatic press conference today, and prosecutors used enlarged photos to lay out a very detailed case, saying the officer, Garrett Rolfe, shot Brooks in the back twice and then kicked him as he lay bleeding.
Okay, so the way they describe that is highly off. Okay, so what happened was Rayshard Brooks, he was asleep in the, he was drunk driving, sleep in the Wendy's drive-through. Cops had him pull over to the side to a parking space. They did all the drunk tests, and then when they finally get to the point of arresting him, he fights with officers. He pretty much beats up 2 of them, runs off, grabs one of the officer's tasers, and as he's running, he turns around to shoot the officer with the taser, and that's when the officer actually ended up shooting him 2 times. Now, the reason why he kicked what she's calling, oh, he kicked him, no, he kicked the taser out of his hand. So Let's presume there.
They said the 27-year-old could be heard on video saying, "I got him." Tonight, the other officer at the scene is now cooperating in the investigation and could testify against his fellow officer. The incident, which was caught on 8 different cameras, started when police found Brooks, who had been drinking, asleep in his car at a Wendy's drive-thru.
So look, he's fighting. He has a taser in his hand. That taser in his hand makes this a justified shoot. Okay? Not to mention the fact that he was heavily resisting. But they get charged anyway, okay? I want you guys to pay attention.
Prosecutors say it ended 41 minutes later when police tried to cuff him.
You see, he turns around, shoots that officer, which now that taser becomes a deadly weapon. Okay, because he could easily tase him, go back, and shoot the officer while he's down. You never know. So that's when the officer ends up shooting him.
Without telling him he was under arrest. They struggled and...
Without telling him he was under... There's a 50-minute video where they're saying, hey, you're under arrest. They try to arrest him and he fights. And he was drunk driving.
Brooks grabbed one officer's taser. He was shot when he took off running. Investigators now say that taser was unable to fire because it had already been used twice.
For you at 11, just hours ago, 2 Atlanta police officers involved in the death of Rayshard Brooks filed a lawsuit in federal court. It's against city officials who accused them in Brooks' death with no formal investigation. This Sunday marks 2 years since Brooks was killed. Our John Schierick brings us the new details tonight.
2 years after this fatal confrontation between Rayshard Brooks and the 2 Atlanta police officers who were trying to arrest him for suspected DUI, the officers are suing the city in federal court. Garrett Rolfe, who shot Brooks to death, and Devin Brosnan, who was also involved in the confrontation, just filed their lawsuits almost exactly 2 years later.
So they're fighting back, which they should, man. They really should. Honestly, it's a very unfortunate situation, but it was a justified shooting, okay? Him turning back, shooting the taser, whether it was fired or not, in the heat of the moment, you can't, after resisting heavily, what do you expect? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And then they burned down the Wendy's, and then his friends, which, you know, were apparently gang members, shot into the vehicle saying that they were protesting by blocking the street, okay, and killed Sequoia Turner. So we see all of this coming full circle, and it's you know, good for them for filing the lawsuit.
They're insisting that they used the least amount of force possible in their attempts to arrest Brooks, given Brooks' violent resistance, and all according to city policy.
Yeah.
Both officers claim that the mayor and police chief and prosecutors violated their constitutional rights, instantly accusing them of murdering Brooks and falsely accusing them of other crimes without indictment or trial, simply for political reasons, such as to try to prevent marches and riots. For example, here's the DA at the time, Paul Howard.
Officer Rolfe actually kicked Mr. Brooks while he laid on the ground.
See, and that was a lie. That was a lie. He might have kicked the taser out of his hand, but it's not like you just kicked him.
But Rolfe's attorneys say the video shows Rolfe stepping over Brooks, not kicking him. Rolfe's attorney, Lance LaRusso, last year.
Denying due process to an individual who has agreed to put his life on the line for the city was not an appropriate maneuver.
And this is why the leadership in the community, they can't be trusted because they're aggravating these situations. There was so much negativity that came from these protests, these riots, and then Black Lives Matter or By Large Mansions ends up being outed as a fraud. You know, it's just like we will never have like the civil rights movement of the 60s. It'll never happen, okay? Why? Because people are not willing to tell the truth. That's really all it comes down to.
And was not going to calm anything.
Rayshard Brooks' widow, Tamika Miller, and her attorneys not available for comment Friday night about the officers' lawsuits. Miller remains determined to see them.
Were they married? She's not a widow if they weren't married. I mean, apparently he was dating that white chick who got charged for burning down the Wendy's, right?
Rayshard Brooks' widow, Tamika Miller, and her attorneys not available for comment Friday night about the officers' lawsuits. Miller remains determined to see them both tried and convicted.
And it hurt. It hurt really bad.
The defendants in the officers' lawsuits are expected to file their responses in the next few weeks. And as for the criminal case against the officers, they're working on getting the special prosecutor in the case to drop the charges against them. A decision possible later this summer.
And I think ultimately they will be dropped. And I'm going to give you guys the update on what happens. And we'll see. We'll see. But I think it will be dropped. And I think, honestly, man, Rayshard Brooks' actions that night, inevitably ended in his demise. And it's a very unfortunate situation. But at the end of the day, you got to be accountable for your actions. And in the community, we don't like to hold people accountable, especially these super gremlins on demon time.
Few weeks. And as for the criminal case against the officers, they're working on getting the special prosecutor in the case to drop the charges against them. A decision possible later this summer. In Atlanta, John Schierick, 11 Alive News.
Gang violence and other kind of violence.
So it is what it is.